Alrighty. Well, first of all, thank you all for joining us, and I hope you can hear and see me clearly. My name is Pam Keith. I was the 2020 nominee, Democratic nominee here in Florida's 18th Congressional District. Prior to that, I had run for Florida 18 in the 2018 cycle, and my first foray into politics was running for U.S. Senate statewide in the state of Florida. Now, you may be wondering why I'm bothering to tell you that, but I wanted to give you a little bit of background as to help you understand my comprehension of the state. When I ran for U.S. Senate in 2016, it was just me, my car, and a whole lot of gumption. And I drove literally 117,000 miles across the state of Florida. I went to every club, caucus, state fair, church, anywhere that would give me an audience to talk to. And so it is from that perspective that I went to the Panhandle and the central part of the states. I went to big counties, small counties. I went all over the state of Florida. And it is that knowledge and background of both the geography, the geology, and the demographics of the state that has helped to influence the plan that I put together. Tonight, I'm going to share with you sort of the bigger parts of this plan that I wrote. I call it Fight for Florida's Future because it is designed to actually change the trajectory of Florida's elections. And when we do so, it changes the trajectory of Florida. The plan that I put into place starts with the premise that what we have been doing has gotten us close, but not close enough. It hasn't gotten us across the line. And it's not because we've lacked good candidates, and it's not because we've lacked necessary donors and resources, and it's certainly not because we lacked enthusiastic, hardworking volunteers. We have all of those things. In fact, we have them in spades. What we've lacked is a thing that puts all of that together, operationalizes it, makes it thoughtful, intentional, coordinated, and effective. So after 2020, I realized some very important things. First of all, I realized that throwing money at the problem isn't going to fix it. I mean, obviously, I am asking for money, but not just to throw into more ads or into more grassroots organizing. We need to be a little bit more thoughtful than we have been. Number two, I realized that the margins and the gap between the Republicans and the Democrats is going the wrong way. In 2016, we won Miamidade County pretty handily. Hillary Clinton got 67% of the vote. But in 2020, Joe Biden got 53% of the vote. Now, that doesn't make any sense, does it? In an election cycle where Joe Biden had the highest Democratic turnout ever, for him to do 14 points worse in Miami-Dade County, it's not because we had massive shifts of population, but there's something going on there that allowed the Republicans to get the upper hand. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about that. The other thing that I really want to mention is that in order to get more people to register as Democrats and to vote as Democrats, we first have to get them thinking as Democrats. Because that is the first step. And I think we're doing ourselves a great disservice if we don't start to ask a very fundamental question. What causes someone to think like a Democrat? Now, that's a simple question, but for a lot of places outside of the state of Florida, a lot of places in the Northeast and the West, things that are institutional help people to come to democratic values, be it your school, your union, your church, your social network, right? The people you hang around, the fact that there are Democrats in positions of power all around you. That is something that causes you to gravitate towards the democratic worldview. Conversely, there are places where the Republican worldview is dominant, right? Because it's a southern state or it's a small community. But what we need to understand is that in Florida, and those of you who live here probably can echo this, that anywhere in Florida, it doesn't matter where you are, if you were to go to a dentist, if you were to go get your nails done, if you were to go get your oil changed, 9 times out of 10, the television is going to be turned to Fox News. The reason that's important is because Fox News doesn't function like CNN, right? It functions to be an extension of RNC messaging. So anything that you hear out of the Republican Party, you also hear echoed in Fox News. That is not the same thing as MSNBC. Let's get clear about that. MSNBC may have a left bent on the news that it reports, but it reports the news. It doesn't spend all its day explaining why a Democratic proposal is the way that we should go. Right? It will report that Democrats are looking for $15 minimum wage, but it doesn't spend all its time explaining all of the advantages of a $15 minimum wage. That's the difference on Fox News. Fox News spends all day discussing, energizing, grievance mongering. It sets in the minds of the people who pay attention to it what they should be believing, what they should be paying attention to, and how to contextualize it. They are an advocacy wing, not a news reporting wing. And that advocacy wing serves as deep RNC messaging all the time, 24/7, 365. If you are watching Fox News, you are being fed a line of advocacy as to why you should be thinking a certain way and voting a certain way. The Democratic Party doesn't have anything that actually competes with that. Right? There's nothing out there that spends all of its time telling people why they should think like Democrats and act like Democrats. Even to the extent that we have talking heads or shows, they don't have any kind of the ubiquity and the access that Fox News has. And it's important that you understand that Fox News gets into as many households and has a kind of revenue that it does because it's part of basic cable packages. Roger Ailes' brilliance was understanding that he could get a whole bunch of people to passively subsidize Fox News by making deals with cable carriers to include Fox News in basic cable. So even if you never watch it, even if you put parental controls on it, even if you have zero desire for your dollars to be subsidizing Fox News, if you have basic cable with Fox News in it, you are paying them $250 a month whether you want to or not. And the thing that the cable providers have done is to require that you stick with this entire bundle, even if you don't watch all the networks in it. You can't opt out of it. That is why 120 million US households that get Fox News are subsidizing Fox News, and they don't really care if they piss off people. Why would they? They don't care if their advertisers go away. Why would they? Right? Because they have a steady, reliable stream of revenue, much of which comes from Democratic households, even if Democrats don't watch them. That is how potent and ubiquitous Fox News is. So when I talk about what Democrats need to do to compete in Florida, the first thing I acknowledge is that there is 24/7, 365 RNC messaging going into virtually all households in Florida. Even if they're not necessarily watching it all the time, they absorb it, even just going out into the community or hanging out or being with their family or whatever. That is something we have to acknowledge and understand to understand the messaging advantage that Republicans have. The second thing we need to understand about the advantage of Republicans is that here in the state of Florida, the Florida GOP works hand in hand with the Florida Chamber of Commerce. Now, the National Chamber of Commerce is considered more or less bipartisan, although it definitely is Republican. It does have, some interest in having good relationships with lawmakers on both sides of the fence. Because Republicans have had control of the Florida legislature for so long, the Florida Chamber of Commerce is not really bipartisan. And in fact, it has this thing called the political roundtable, where members of the Chamber of Commerce pay $10,000, I think, and it could be more, right? A minimum of $10,000 to sit on this roundtable, which gives them access not just to lawmakers, but also to candidates and to have a voice in vetting candidates. What that means is that the stream of revenue to the Florida GOP is steady, it's consistent, it's very significant, right? And it works hand in hand with the Florida business community. And that's a symbiotic relationship, which means that the party gets money from the chamber, but also is also always paying attention to what the chamber wants and needs, right? That's how it's symbiotic. There's another component of this that people need to understand, that is because the Chamber of Commerce is a business entity, its personality is reflected in the Florida GOP, a business enterprise. It has professional staff, it has year-round operations, and it has professionalized data and polling and focus groups and surveys. It gets the top of the moment information about how to run its operations. It also has centralized data gathering so that it's archiving data about voters, about candidates and donors and issues. It is centralizing and it's archiving all of that data. And it is able to share that with its candidates and its campaigns. The last thing you need to know is that when it comes to statewide races, the Florida GOP basically sets up the campaign operations long before the nominees are decided. They set up where they're going to get their messaging and where they need to focus and where they're going to buy their ads, and the candidates just kind of slide in. You may not want to believe me on this, but those of you who worked on the Andrew Gillum campaign, of which I know there are many, know that for the first 3 weeks of that campaign, Democrats are basically standing up an operation for him to be able to get across the state. We were waiting for staff to get hired. We were waiting for materials to get out in the field. And that is absolutely not a knock on Andrew Gillum's team at all. That's just kind of the way it was. On the Republican side, Ron DeSantis just kind of slid right into the Florida GOP operation. He wasted zero time. They did not have to spend any time staffing up. Now, how is it that they didn't have to spend time staffing up, but we did? How is it that they didn't have to spend time getting materials into the field, but we did? The answer is that they were ready, willing, and able to do that, and they had it ready to go, and we didn't. Now, it's true that we didn't know who our nominee was going to be, but we could have set up a lot of that no matter who the nominee was going to be. And that's one of the things that this plan that I've put together starts to address. So I've given you sort of a big picture take on this. First, we have to understand that we are not going to win elections in Florida until we increase the number of people who think like Democrats, which is a messaging and contact issue, before we get them to register as Democrats and turn out as Democrats. We need to increase the hard number of people who think like Democrats in our state. And we need to reach the ones who do think like us. And we need to do it in a thoughtful, intentional, and systematic way. We can no longer accept the notion that we're going to leave it to candidates when they get their ability together to do it, to go reach out in the community. That just cannot work. It does not work, and it puts way too much pressure on our candidates. We have a very late primary, which means that our candidates spend all of their time infighting in primary season, basically, making the case about their viability, right, and their fit for the district, rather than making the case about the issues. And we preach to our own choir 9.5 of the election cycle. We only talk to the general electorate for 6 weeks of the election cycle. That was absolutely intentional on the part of the Florida legislature, because late primaries favor incumbents, right? And most of our elected officials in the state are Republicans. So it favors them. So we need to understand that and come at it from a different perspective. So before I start to take your questions, let me just sort of outline for you what the plan is. Plan number one is to stand up a headquarters operation, a full-time, year-round, professionally staffed operation in the business of engaging the community, educating people, and inspiring them to think like Democrats and then register and vote like Democrats, and to put those operations permanently in the communities across the state, most especially in those parts of Florida where we don't have current operations, right? The way that this works is sort of a headquarters with regional offices across the state. I've made a map of 21 regions that breaks down the state based on geographics and also kind of the personality of the counties, so that there is a permanent field office in every part of the state. From that field office, we run specific programs, voter and community engagement programs that target African-American voters or young people or veterans or seniors or migrant workers or immigrants. These are programs that I've designed specifically to work out of specific offices so that they see us constantly. The other thing about these regional hub offices is that they're not there just to be engaging people politically. They're engaging people in the context of their lives. They're community assistance as well. There'll be food pantries and diaper banks and formula banks. There'll be places where charities and philanthropic organizations can get hands and logistics and assistance, places where they can have their meetings. This is now an office that helps the community function better, period. And in doing so, gets to build those lasting relationships and influence people through their service as well as their advocacy. So that is the plan. Once you staff those offices up and you staff them with people who are there all the time, year round, building relationships, making a difference in people's lives, building the kind of connection that helps them find those difficult to find voters, then you start to increase the number of people who see democratic values in action and start to believe that they make a difference in their lives. And you combine that with year-round advertising messaging and social media messaging and messaging through other media. You combine those things together, and then you start to see Democrats in Florida in action. I cannot tell you how many places in this state people just do not see Democrats at all. They don't see Democratic bumper stickers. They don't see signs. They don't see T-shirts. They don't see Democrats. I cannot tell you how many clubs and caucuses across the state that I went to where they said, oh, well, if I didn't come to this meeting, I would never see another Democrat. Well, that's ridiculous. Not in a state where we actually have more registered Democrats than Republicans. For some reason, there's an ease with showing that you're a Trump supporter, but somehow there's tension around showing that you're a Democrat. Well, that's because we haven't made Democrats feel safe in doing so by making sure that the numbers are there for them to do it as a team and as a group and to feel positive about it. So if we do this right, come 2022, let's think June 2022, Florida will be flooded with Democratic candidates, messaging, positive feelings, people in the community talking about what Democrats in their community did for them, what the Democratic policies like Joe Biden, the House and the Senate have gotten done, what a difference it makes. We explain it. We don't just say it. We say it consistently, and they see us present in their communities all the time. And when our candidates finally step up and are ready to compete, now they have an entity that makes them compete effectively no matter where they are. It's no longer going to be just about battleground districts. It's going to be about fighting everywhere that we can, and we can fight everywhere. It's about providing logistical support, translation support, social media support, ad support, and every other kind of support we can to our candidates so that when we ask people to step up and run, we don't crucify them when they do. We've got to make it easier for candidates to compete, and that means building a machine that they can plug into rather than asking them to build a machine on their own, because every candidate who has to build a machine is duplicating the effort of another candidate. So let's build one machine, a really big one, a really good one, a really smart one that helps all of our candidates get across the line. And if we do that, we're going to have a totally different result in 2022. So I've said what I got to say. I'm so excited to take your questions. And thank you for being on with me tonight. So let's see, what do we got? I get your questions here on the side of my, let's see, we got, okay. Pierre Creighton, you said Democrats are for the people, community, science, and pragmatism. Absolutely right. Pierre, thank you for that comment. It's very true that the Democrats are the ones who are about governing, right? We deal with science. We deal with things the way they are, not the way we think they ought to be. We deal with the realities of people's daily challenges. That's why our policies are always thinking about how to make people's existence a little easier, be it in increasing minimum wages, getting them health care, making sure they have good schools, clean air and clean water, transportation, infrastructure. All of that is what we think about. The Republicans right now are obsessing about Dr. Seuss, right? About culture wars, rather than the true daily challenges that the people are dealing with. We can do better than that. And the thing is, we are doing better than that. So why is it that our message is not getting out to the people in the community? Well, again, we don't have 24/7, 365 of television into their houses telling them why they should be angry at Republicans. That isn't what we do, but that's precisely what Fox News does. 24/7, 365, they're giving people reasons to be angry at the Democrats, at Joe Biden, at Democratic policy, and about, whatever changes in society and culture that they should be fearful of. And that is not getting us anywhere closer to fixing people's problems. I mean, just a perfect example of that, Pierre. Just the other day, Maria Bartiromo was on saying that, we know for sure that COVID was, some Chinese scientists in a lab did this, and why aren't we doing something about that? And you have to ask yourself, how do they get away with saying something that is totally fact-free like that? I mean, there's literally no evidence that this was some sort of weaponized Chinese tool. That's just something that's said in the QAnon space. I mean, it's not like millions of Chinese people weren't affected by COVID too. So why would she say something like that? Because she wanted her audience to be mad at Joe Biden for not doing something about it. What exactly did they think he was going to do? Right? They use something that is fundamentally not true, and they spin up people to be mad about it. And there's no way to respond to that, right? There's no way to deal with that unless you are spending all day, every day, 24/7, 365 responding to these claims. We don't have a mechanism to do that, right? So that's exactly why we get stuck where we get, right? I want to give you an example of why messaging statewide and having a messaging capacity is so important. Just today, it was announced that Joe Biden has extended temporary protected status to immigrants from Venezuela, people who were fleeing the violence in the Maduro government in Venezuela. Now, what state would that make a difference in? The state with the biggest Venezuelan population outside of Venezuela? Ours, Florida. And the majority of those Venezuelans are in Broward and Dade counties. So, wouldn't it make sense for them to be made aware that Joe Biden has just done this? Whose job is it to inform them of that? Whose responsibility is it to inform the Venezuelan refugees here in Florida that Joe Biden just changed their immigration status to the positive in a very significant way? Whose job is it to tell them that? I mean, are we supposed to just assume that they see that? Where would they see that? Well, I mean, if they're on Twitter, I guess you would see it. If you're watching NBC News, you might see it. But what if you're not on Twitter and you're not watching NBC News? Let's say you watch Fox News all day. Would you know it then? Would you? No. So my question again is, whose job is it to put that in front of the Venezuelan community in Florida? Well, it ought to be us Democrats who do that. And we ought to have a standing relationship with all of the media, Spanish-speaking media outlets in South Florida. We ought to have a schedule and a fees to run ads. We ought to be able to stand up a Spanish-speaking ad on a dime or a moment's notice to get that on all of the radio stations in South Florida. We should be having that in all on Telemundo and all of the local television stations, the television news, especially anything broadcast in Spanish in South Florida. We ought to have a standing relationship and media relationship with them, right? Am I wrong about that? No, I don't think I am. Because if we did that today, they should be hearing about it today. It's naturally not worth telling them that we did this 6 weeks before the election, because by 2022, this whole thing will have completely missed its opportunity. Telling the Venezuelan community in Florida right now what Democrats are doing for them plants a seed that only needs to be watered in 2022. And it's not competing with counter messaging at the moment, right? So now's the time to tell the Venezuelan community that was convinced by the Trump folks that we're all a bunch of socialists, right? That's how they turned out more for Trump than for us. How'd that happen? They got that message. We should be sending them a different message. You know those people that you were so afraid were socialists? Well, they just gave you protected status so you don't ever have to worry about being deported, right? And that you have safety here and you can actually feel comfortable. That to me, that's a great message, right? So why aren't we doing it right now? Well, it's a little fast, right? But we ought to have something that can deploy something like that immediately. That is what Fight for Florida's Future does, right? It has a central headquarters with a media room that can make ads and get them deployed to our Spanish-speaking media outlets immediately, and do so in a culturally relevant and significant way. Don't you think that would make sense to have that going forward for the next 2 years? I certainly think it would. So I thank you for your question. And I think that that's exactly the kind of thing that I am thinking about. So next question. I see, okay, I see a question from Nikki. Lori Prim said something to replying to Nikki O, and it needs not only be heard, be seen. Yeah, I think that one of the things that we talk about here in Florida is the need to be not only doing what we're supposed to be doing, but making sure that people see it. Florida is a very, very big state. It is 22 million people, and it is huge geographically. I know because I've driven it many times. And one of the things that people may not understand is the degree to which people in the northern part of the state are totally disconnected from people from the southern part of the state and vice versa. So if you are doing something really cool in North Florida, the people in South Florida are not going to go. Heck, if you're doing something really cool in Miami, the people in Broward may not know, right? Like, that is something that we have not done a really great job on, is helping people see what we're actually doing for them in the community. So one of the great things that we can do is up our social media prowess. One of the things that I learned is that social media is a skill set. It isn't natural. Like, you have to spend a lot of time in social media to build a following, I know, and you have to be able to be putting out the kind of material that grabs attention. That is a skill set. We cannot expect every candidate to be able to do that successfully and also run a campaign, nor can we expect our clubs and caucuses as Democrats to be able to do that. So it shouldn't surprise you that many of our clubs and caucuses don't have Facebook pages, don't have Twitter followings, don't have even websites, so that if somebody moves into the county, they don't even know that where their Democratic club is. Why should we expect someone who is a club or caucus chair to be a social media maven? That's not realistic. But what we could do is centralize some social media skills and provide them free of charge to our clubs and caucuses across the state, so that every club or caucus could say, hey, Fight for Florida's Future, we need a new Facebook page, or we have an event coming up. Can you help us get that on board across our county? Well, now you have someplace that has centralized data about everybody in your county, and it has social media prowess to get that event in front of all of your Democrats and all of your independents and non-party, right? That is something that we can do from a centralized position. Now, the work of the club and caucus is magnified in a way that brings the skill and the technical capacity to magnifying messages into the hands of the people who are actually doing the work. It's how you elevate what people are actually doing. Another perfect example of that is Second Chance Coalition, my friend Desmond Meade. They've done amazing work at restoring voting rights for our returning citizens, right? Amazing work. Question, how do we get that work out of the community? Well, they're doing a good job of it on the ground, but we can also help them in social media and ad buys and other ways of getting that out into the community. There are a whole bunch of people who could get their voting rights back if they knew what to do, right? We can help with that. That is the goal of this organization. The bottom line is this: we cannot do this without real investment. And I am not going to be dishonest about that. We are looking for a significant investment, both from small dollar donors and institutional donors. But if you can keep in mind that $100 million were spent in Florida by just one donor in 2020, we think about the $55 million that was spent in campaigns, major campaigns, just in the last 2 cycles. The question is, what of that spend was left over to build from in 2021? The answer is not much. Most of that went to ads, and there's a good reason for that. Ads are very persuasive, but we've got to do something more than just pour money into ads. We need to start building connection, infrastructure, thoughtful deployment of resources, and communications, campaign assistance. These are the things, and most especially data, getting really up-to-date, usable data. Those are the things that are going to make a difference going forward into 2022. Because if we fail to do that, we're going to be back in the situation where every candidate has to build from the ground up every component of competing in an election. And they're going to be competing against Republicans who don't have to do that. And we are naturally putting every Democrat at a disadvantage when we do that. So we have to not do that. I hope I've made the case to you, and I hope that I've answered your questions. But there may be some more, so if you have some questions out there, by all means, ask away. I see a few more people. Thank you for joining us. Let's see. All right. Okay. Okay. I see a comment from Abdur Rahman, who says the Dem Party has been, hi Michelle, how are you? I see a comment from Abdur who says the Democratic Party has been slacking on messaging. I don't know that it's so much slacking as that we think of messaging as something that's done later in the cycle. And especially because we think of messaging as something that's to be done by candidates. That is a real problem. First of all, as a candidate, I can tell you that my principal mission as a candidate is not communicating about the strengths and merits of democratic ideas. My job as a candidate is to sell me, right? So yeah, I sell that I'm a Democrat, but I sell the nuances of my background and my experience and my perspective and my personality that makes you want to choose me, which is great. And the same is done by other candidates, which is great. But that's not the same thing as actually spending time advocating the policies themselves to people, right? That is not the same thing. And we keep thinking that MSNBC does that. No, it doesn't. We keep thinking that, you know, regular NBC News or CNN does that. No, it doesn't. What actually does that is person-to-person contact. Your church does that. Your union does that. Your fraternity or your sorority does that. Your parents very much do that. But we don't do that. That's something that seems to happen on social media. Facebook does that. Twitter does that. But the news does not do that. Another thing that you need to keep in mind is that a lot of that persuasion that gets people to think like us doesn't necessarily build a bridge to voting. And that's especially true with young people. I actually ran the numbers, and there are about 1.2 million people who are between the ages of 16 and 18 who will be eligible to vote in 2022 who were not eligible to vote in 2020. 1.2 million. That's a lot of people. Now, here's my question. What is our plan to get those people to vote Democratic? I mean, we know that most of them think like Democrats. The polling and the surveys that have been done on young people prove that they lean very, very much more D than R. But do they actually vote? And if they don't, why not? And if they don't, what are we doing to change that? My plan and Fight for Florida's Future actually has a systematic and thoughtful process to engage young people and to get them to register to vote, to register as Democrats, and to participate in voting as Democrats. We cannot take it on face value that they'll be influenced by March for Our Lives, or they'll be influenced by, you know, LGBTQ rights or immigration rights or wages or whatever, or student loan debt. We can't take it at face value. We have to have a thoughtful, strategic, systematic process to get to young people, encourage them to register as Democrats and to actually register as a Democrat, right? Absolutely. How about our snowbirds? Have you ever thought about the number of people who come to Florida for parts of the year who are actually Democrats in New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut, or wherever they come from? Have we ever actually thoughtfully approached some of those folks and asked them to register as Democrats in Florida? I'm not aware of any systematic plan to do that. But you know, many of them spend enough time in Florida that they could actually register to vote here. Now, maybe they don't want to. But what's the harm in asking them to, right? To have a systematic, thoughtful process to ask them to do that. No harm at all. And in fact, it's something that I think we need to absolutely do. Another thing that we need to be cognizant of is that the Republicans, through Rick Scott, actually came up with an idea on how to use taxpayer dollars to recruit Republicans to move to our state and advertise in red districts and counties across the country, especially in retirement communities. Do we do that? Could we do that? Absolutely. So that's another idea of a targeted, intentional program to increase the number of Democrats in our state. Again, if we increase the number of Democrats, then we don't have to work so hard at turnout, right? Because we have more Democrats to work from. So these are some of the ideas that I put in this 70-page plan that I've put it in chapter, verse, and footnotes on how to set this up. Fight for Florida's future is the thing that is going to make the difference going forward. I do see another question from the field. Pam, with all of these vital suggestions that you're bringing forward, are you getting any feedback from the Dem Party, especially in Florida, to enact? I mean, this thing hit the ground just a week or so ago, and we have forwarded it to the party leadership. We haven't heard back yet, but I'm hopeful and optimistic that this is something that we can work hand in hand with the Florida party. I know that they have some challenges at the moment, especially since they have a new chair, a new executive director. I've heard good things about both. And I know that they've kind of got their hands full sort of righting the ship and trying to get things back moving the right way. My hope is that they are open and embracing of us working what we're doing to focus on the election, and they can do what they're doing to sort of focus on the party so that we work collaboratively, because that is the goal of Fight for Florida's Future. We're not supplanting or taking the place of any grassroots organization out there. We're just here to give support, logistics, finance, data, personnel, whatever we can do to help what is already going on. So if it's New Florida Majority or Working Families Party or Organized Florida or New Blue Coalition or whatever it is, we're not there to take their place. We're there to assist, support, help to coordinate, and let them be more successful in what they're doing. Give them tools to be more successful in what they're doing if they so desire. Again, this is not principally about grassroots organizing. This is about all of the other stuff that we aren't doing, that the Republicans are, that makes them so much more competitive. And to the extent that it has a real community-facing component, it's not necessarily about organizing people out there. It's about building relationship within the community and a permanent presence in the community to build long-standing relationships. There are certain populations that we think we can really make a difference in. For example, there are 911,000 African Americans in the state of Florida that are of age to vote and not registered to vote. Not that they're Democrats who don't vote, they're just not registered altogether. I've taken the time to break down by county, the number of African Americans in that county who are of age and not registered to vote. We're not going to find those people through the traditional routes, because the traditional routes would have gotten them registered by now. So we got to go deeper. We got to build deeper connections and deeper relationships to get to those people. But we can. Even if we brought 200,000 or 300,000 of that 900,000 cohort to the table, we would wipe out the edge that the GOP had in the 2020 election cycle. Bring a third of that group back to the table, we can put the Democrats very, very close to winning. But that alone isn't going to do it. We're going to have to go into the young people, into the immigrants, into the migrants, into the seniors, the veterans. We're going to have to do a whole sort of all hands on deck approach to give us opportunities to pick up votes in every community, especially in parts of the state where we have not been competitive before. If we do that, we force the Republicans to have to start defending their turf. And that's exactly where we want to be. We want to be in a place where they stop feeling so confident that they're just carrying Henry and Charlotte and Jefferson without any effort. Because I bet you there's Democrats up there, or people whose lives would be changed if they saw what Democrats can do for them in their communities. So that is a very, very important and significant part of this communication. This effort is to start early building roots in that part of the state. Because if we don't do that now, it's going to be too late in like a year and a half. It's just going to be too late. It's not going to be fruitful. We need to do it now. And I'm happy to start now. I'm happy to start the headquarters, and let's start at the northern part of the state. Let's start building offices in the northern part of the state. Let's start funding operations in the northern part of the state. Communications, visibility, logos, social media, all of those things we can start doing. And believe it or not, it won't take that long before you start to see real change. People start to see, okay, well, where have you been? And what are you doing for us? We can talk about things that really matter to them, like minimum wages, like Social Security and Medicare and securing those, like healthcare, people in the northern part of the state do actually care about that stuff. They have very sincere and serious concerns about the environment, especially with respect to water quality. Those are things that Democrats are awesome on, but they may not know that we're the party that's fighting for those things. So that's exactly why we need to start building roots in that community now, and it can't be haphazard. It really has to be thoughtful, systematic, and professional from beginning to end. So thank you for that question. I'm going to put out last call for questions. For those of you who want to know the entire plan, you certainly reach out to me on Pam Keith FL. You can certainly, or at Twitter. And if you are interested in joining our effort, if you're interested in being a volunteer, obviously we will be grateful for your volunteer service. If you're looking for a paid staff position, stay tuned. As soon as we get this thing funded and up and running, we will be hiring, and we will be hiring people for permanent roles in their community, hiring locally from people who know their community to be community liaison and program staff, so that we're leveraging what we do best anyway. And we just put it in a systematic, centralized, and professional way. So if you're looking to join us, please do. If you're looking to put your resources, your financial resources into something, this is the thing to fund, because this is a thing that has the plan and it's ready to execute now. And you guys obviously know that I'm a pretty tenacious girl. When I put my mind to something, I just keep going at it till I get it. But the biggest question is, can we get the institutional dollars to support this effort? Well, there's only one way to find out, and that is to get out there and make the ask, to make the case as best as you can, to prove it, that you were the person with the drive and the tenacity to do it, and to put it in a way that is a business systematic plan that they can see actually will work. That's what I've done with Fight for Florida's Future. It is not in any way in opposition to what is already going on in the state. It fills the gaps with the things that are not. And that's why I'm so excited about it and why I'm so glad to share it with you. Over the next, few weeks, months, we are going to be taking this show on the road to talk to investor groups, party groups, obviously up to the folks in DC, the folks in Tallahassee. I've already made overtures to the folks at the Florida Democratic Party, to all the clubs and caucuses out there. I want to talk to you because you're still a backbone of the party. Don't think for a second that I don't value what clubs and caucuses do. I absolutely do. That is where I got started in politics, and that's where my heart is. But we got to find a way to make their efforts that much more fruitful. So everybody that is already doing work in the state of Florida, don't think that it goes into the ether. Absolutely not. It's just Fight for Florida's Future can be the magnet that pulls all those parts together, operationalizes them, and helps them to be as effective as humanly possible. The bottom line is, I know we can win Florida. If you can turn Georgia blue, you can most certainly turn Florida blue. But where Georgia had the advantage of a Stacey Abrams, who built an entity outside of the party and really focused on turning out Black people, we may have to do something similar. Put something outside the party and really focus on building connections with the communities that we need to turn out. And we can only do that by having a systematic, thoughtful, intentional plan to run every component of what it takes for our candidates to compete. So thank you for giving me your time. If you have any other questions, please let me know. If you're interested in volunteering, or even if you're interested in a staff job, let us know, and stay tuned. I will be doing these Q&A lives periodically to sort of help you come up to date as to where we are. There's only one way forward, and that is thoughtful with a plan and an intention to win. And we certainly cannot be the party that focuses on the social components of being a member of the Democratic Party without understanding the business components of competing against Republicans and winning. So thank you for giving me your time. Thank you for believing in me. I look forward to continuing to partner with you as we go forward, and I wish you all the very best. Stay safe out there, get your vaccines, wear your masks, take care of each other, and check back in a few weeks. We'll have lots of updates for you. Thank you.